All right. So we're doing this class because, well, one, JGM Financial and Allstate. So Frank, Joe, and Chloe, they reached out to me not long ago, and we were talking about flood zones and how it affects property owners. And they were enlightening me actually onto information that I only knew a little bit about. I don't really know a ton about. But there are new rates, right, guys? That risk, what do you call it? Flood risk 2.0, they're calling it.
2.0.
Yeah, and so there's some things that are going to affect property owners and sellers, and they'll also affect buyers who are looking to purchase these homes as well. And I'd say I've ran into an issue twice already. One was about a year and a half ago. I had a listing in Bloomfield. The sellers owned the house. We went under contract, and the title company came back and said this house is in a flood zone. They were kind of like mad at us for not telling them, but we had no idea. There was just this little piece in the back of their lot that was designated a flood zone from FEMA because they just redrew the maps, but nobody really knew. The public didn't really know, and ended up losing that deal. Had to get another, had to relist it as a flood zone. And the disappointing part too was if they stayed there for another 10 years, they might have been paying the same taxes. If your house gets designated as a flood zone, you should be paying less in taxes and property taxes. And that didn't happen. And I looked up the house shortly after it sold, and it looks like the town reduced the price of the house, reduced the taxes by like $2,500, which was a pretty big percentage. So as real estate agents, it's really good to be informed on this. We have to know so many different things. So why not just reach out to experts who can give us the real information and just be a good resource for us. So from there, I'll let Frank and Joe take over and start the presentation.
Sure, I appreciate that, Joe. So first off, thanks for having us. We always appreciate when someone puts value in this kind of stuff. It's the way that we feel about working with our customers and educating them, and working with realtors and people in related industries. It's always kind of good to see the same. So I'll do a quick intro about us, and then after that, I'll pass it off to Frankie for the flood information. So we're a local Allstate office. We have three. We bought one in Rochelle Park last year. We were in Little Falls, and then our main office is in Pequannock. Given that as kind of the model that you guys have, no one really walks into a lot of these places anymore. So we've actually consolidated down to one office in Pequannock. A little bit about me. I've been in the insurance business 15 years now. And went off on my own. It'll be our 10-year anniversary in August. And I started with one employee, about 1,000 customers, now to about 6,000, 15 employees. We've grown a ton. We have good footprint in the entire area, in North Jersey. And the reason for this, the reason we're doing it, we do work with a lot of realtors and lenders, and being a part of the home buying process. That's kind of our favorite clients to deal with as they're getting ready to buy a home and handling all their insurance needs from there. So we just kept seeing this come up a lot from every realtor and lender that we were speaking with. Can you check if this isn't a flood zone? They wouldn't mention it to their client. Then we're in the 11th hour, and we got to break their hearts and say, hey, it's a $3,500 a year flood quote, and the homeowner may have been paying zero like they were in your circumstance, or they were grandfathered into the old map and they were paying $400 a year, and now so the seller's got to lower the price, or the homeowner doesn't meet DTI anymore. All this stuff kept coming up. So we figured, how can we be of a resource, right? So look, I know everybody that you guys talk to is a potential client of ours, but we know the reverse isn't true. I only know so many people who are going to buy a house throughout my lifetime. So the value, obviously our end goal is to be a big resource for you. Hopefully work with your own insurance and be somebody that you can trust for us to have your clients work with us when they're ready to close their insurance. But in return for that, and no strings attached. It's not, you send us information. You want to know flood determination. You want to know flood quotes. You want anything regarding homeowners, anything that we can help in the home buying process. we're here to do, whether we get the deal or not. I have a lot of connections in the business, whether it's from me, whether I refer it out to a trusted colleague of mine, and I would help see it through all the way anyway. As if it was mine. We're here to be useful, like, to you guys. I know that something that's really important in real estate is really being with the customer through the entire home buying process. It helps to have the title people in house, or close connections, lenders, insurance people, surveyors, elevation certificates, all of that, having your contractors that you trust. We want to be one of them, and that's what we believe in. So that's just a little bit about us. And if you reach out to us and anything, we have full dedicated service team, on top of the salespeople, on top of dealing with myself and everything. We're always here. We'll all answer our cell phone weekends, anytime that's convenient for you. You need some, we know you guys work off hours, kind of, so do we. You call me for anything, and I'll find you an answer whenever you need it. And that's what's most important to us. And today we're going to educate you on as much as we can about the flood process, flood maps, everything that goes on regarding that, that may potentially come up either in your own insurance or any of the clients that you're working with, insurance and deals. So from there, I'll kick it off to Frankie, and he'll get into the presentation from there.
Awesome. Again, thanks to Joe for putting this together for us, and everybody joining in. So we appreciate it, and hopefully you'll learn a little something or two, get some value out of this. Really, the idea for hosting these, this is our fourth one, came from the amount of conversations we had with lenders, realtors like yourselves that we'd work with for helping clients obtain flood insurance, run flood quotes, check properties if they're in a flood zone. And we saw the same conversations happening over and over again. And we love to educate, and it was never a problem for us, but kind of identified an opportunity, for providing value back to agents and people, partners, in our network that whether they send us business, lean on us, but an opportunity to provide some value and really educate them, and better equip them for dealing with their clients, hopefully getting deals done, providing information to the client, helping them navigate the home buying process. So we know has a lot of moving parts, and we like to look at ourselves as somebody that can take one more thing off their plate, one less thing for them to worry about, having trusted advisor, as we say, to help them with the insurance. So that's where the idea came from. And as we go out, feel free, drop in any questions throughout, but again, hopefully we provide some value here. So one of the important distinctions we like to make before we talk about flood is the difference between homeowners insurance and flood insurance. So starting with homeowners insurance, typically going to cover water damage in a house, in a property, that comes from things like burst pipes. We have a bad storm, maybe some shingles get blown off a roof and rainwater enters through a damaged roof or window, toilet overflow. True story, a claim not too long ago, one of our clients' daughters flushed a Barbie doll down the toilet, and the ensuing water that backed up and damaged the bathroom and floor below. Sump pump failure as well, something very common with older homes, basements in New Jersey, having a sump pump system. So issues with sump pump failing, overflowing, also will fall under homeowners insurance. Flood insurance, that also damage from water, but where the water is the source of the damage, right, is water that rises, a rising body of water that usually covers a normally dry land. I'm sure where everybody is right now, you look outside, around your house, around your office, normally dry land. It's not supposed to have water there, but if there is a storm and causes that groundwater to accumulate and enter your home, typically through basements, windows, doors, things like that, would be considered flood. And it's important to know the distinction, obviously for assessing risk of a property in a flood zone and the likelihood. And, that is essentially, any it's government regulated, federally regulated, any federally backed mortgage that is in a high risk flood area, I'm sure a bunch of you have seen, it requires carry flood insurance. So obviously knowing that risk and then potentially where the damage can come from, helping homeowners better prepare for that. And also knowing the difference between a potential homeowner's claim or flood claim, because even if you're not in a flood zone, as you see, we thought this was a really interesting statistic. Essentially, weather patterns, whether we know the cause or not, I'm sure we all can agree that, unpredictable weather patterns cause a risk for all of us. And between 2015 and 2019, more than 40% of NFIP claims came from properties outside of the high-risk flood areas. So 40% of their claims from that 4-year span came from properties that were not actually even required to have flood insurance. So just goes to show you that even though you're not required to carry the flood insurance through the lender, that these unpredictable weather patterns, a lot of things we've seen in the last 10, 15 years, Sandy, Ida most recently, and plenty more in between there. And also when it comes time for a customer to potentially have to file a claim, knowing the difference between what can qualify for a claim on the homeowners versus the flood insurance. So something that an example that we like to share, something recent, the Hurricane Ida, we had a very significant, probably the largest influx of claims after Hurricane Ida, because areas that typically weren't flooding, people that had never experienced that were victims of flooding situations. And as an agent, us being there to help them, number one, guide them through the process to determine whether something would be a flood claim or a home insurance claim. And I'll give an example of that, but also something that was even more kind of alarming. I forget the exact number. I think it was about 60 or 70% of the properties that were flooded during Ida in New Jersey were not in high-risk flood zones. I'm sure a lot of you remember seeing the news and kind of the devastation and in the areas that really least expecting of it. And fortunately, there was some government aid provided. There's a lot of red tape. It can take quite a bit for a property owner to receive any assistance there. But again, just shows that it's these unpredictable weather patterns do pose a risk, and we'll go over some options there and how a homeowner can protect themselves even if they're not in a flood zone. And something with the distinction between a home claim and a flood claim. I mentioned the sump pump failure on homeowners. So it's a common misconception that any water rising in the basement would be considered flood and not covered. But we saw a lot of claims come through for sump pumps failing during Ida. Essentially, the surge of the water causing sump pumps to fail. Whether being overworked, breakers tripping, power outages. And if your sump pump fails and the water rises through the pit and floods your basement, as long as if that claim is filed correctly to the insurance agency that the cause was the sump pump failing, and it's typically covered under the homeowner's insurance. But if you call your homeowner's insurance company and you just say, hey, my basement's flooded, and it's, they asked when it happened and it was during a storm and you're unsure of the actual cause of it, there's a chance that claim can be denied. And, without having an agent to really guide you through and help you, or even an adjuster that has the time to explain it. Because during Ida, happened to be in the middle of COVID when adjusters were still not even going out to customers' homes. So they were doing a lot of the claim intakes over the phone. They didn't even have the ability to send somebody out. So it literally just relied on the word of the the homeowner. And if they were unaware of their situation, the risks, the coverages, if they had a sump pump or not, it could have been potential. And I've heard stories from friends and things like that they had coverage issues, and it was difficult to navigate because they didn't know the source of the water. So just showing that that's important to know the distinction there, and that even though you may not be in a flood zone, or that it's required, that there's still a risk for the property flooding. So a couple more distinctions to make relevant towards the flood insurance elevation certificate. So Joe had mentioned it, but elevation certificate, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it as well. Simply a document. It contains the details of your home's structure, the elevation of the structure compared to the base flood elevation of the area. They typically can cost $500 to $2,000. They're done by licensed surveyors or engineers. And previously, any home built after 1970 that was in a flood zone required an elevation certificate, and didn't necessarily mean that it would provide a lower rate. So all those homes, any home built after 1970, or a home that had any major renovations after 1970 would require that, and it didn't always guarantee a lower rate. And we can go over some examples of that later, and and now with the new 2.0 changes, how they've made some changes to benefit customers that were forced to get those. And then the often confused compared to the elevation certificate, the flood zone determination letter. That's simply just the document, the zone determination when you put in a property address that will let us know if the property is in a flood zone. Some agents have access to things like CoreLogic that will provide that, but also for us, it's, as Joe mentioned, properties popping up that potentially a map had changed and determination letter may be out of date, or who knows the source where it was obtained from. We also prefer to pull up the actual flood maps and get the aerial view of the property, the lot, because like that deal that Joe had dealt with in Bloomfield could be as simple as a small sliver, a square foot of a piece of a backyard that falls into a flood zone. Even if the house is kind of even up a little bit more of a hill and the house is completely out of a flood zone, all it takes is that little piece of the backyard to place them in a mandatory flood zone where they'll have to purchase the flood insurance. So kind of just a further step we take, because we've seen how many times that can cause issues for agents or buyers when they go to purchase a property, and then as they're getting through underwriting and title company or lets them know that they are in a flood zone and potentially cause issues with the deal. So with setting these up and the education, we thought that it was a great time to coincide with the Flood 2.0 changes that were rolled out the end of 2020 and renewals starting in 2022. So just about everybody that has flood insurance through the National Flood Program does have the Flood 2.0 rate changes applied, and essentially they labeled it equity in action. Had been a while since the rating had been updated, and essentially wanted to utilize all current technology, best practices for assessing individual risk versus just general flood zones. So actually trying to make the rates more equitable. A flood zone, typically a pretty broad area, could be a whole neighborhood, a town, and no matter what the cost of a property may actually have been, like the market value, you have $1 million house compared to a $250,000 house potentially in the same neighborhood, they would be charged the same amount for flood insurance. So one of the things that they attempted to do is the higher value homes will be paying more in insurance compared to the lower value homes. We've been seeing some positive changes for those customers that have the lower value homes where they're not paying as much, and vice versa. Also removing the requirement for having to get an elevation certificate. So as I mentioned before, any home built after 1970 in a flood zone required it. So I've been in insurance now going on 9 to 10 years, and we'd have somebody purchasing a house built after 1970 that was in a flood zone. They would be required to shell that money out of pocket. I say it could range anywhere from $500 to $2,000 for an elevation certificate, and doesn't actually help them. Believe it or not, sometimes when you apply it, you can see the rate go up. Luckily, they wouldn't make you, FEMA, the program wouldn't make you take the higher rate. They would allow you to stay with the initial rate, but then that person is out potentially $500, a couple $1,000 for having to get the elevation certificate. So they had removed that as well, which has been a nice change. Premium discounts, automated rating, more predictability in rating, things that kind of happen on the back end of the quote there's been changes to as well. And again, really kind of to summarize, they were looking to make it more equitable, rates more predictable, kind of assess an individual property's risk compared to just an overall flood zone. So with the National Flood Insurance Program, that's the flood insurance written through FEMA, probably the one most people are familiar with. Up until 2019, it was the only option for a primary flood insurance policy, and the only product that mortgages accepted for a borrower to insure the house against flood insurance. Federally backed, standard limits and deductibles, maximum limits $250,000 on a building and $100,000 in contents, and standard deductibles. Not a lot of opportunity to customize. If you're looking for additional coverages, enhanced coverage on belongings, more coverage on the house. Obviously, homes are getting more expensive to build, so that $250,000 may not go as far as it used to in the past, and standard waiting periods. So standard waiting period is 30 days for somebody applying for a FEMA flood insurance policy. That is waived if it's for a home closing, but somebody that's just looking to get into that program, maybe they're seeing the potential risk, even if they're not in a flood zone, they have to wait 30 days for that coverage to kick in. So in 2019, they passed a federal rule requiring lenders to accept private flood insurance as long as private lenders meet certain requirements. And up until 2020, that would not apply for FHA, but as of this past December 2022, they started requiring FHA loans to accept private flood insurance as well. So some of the benefits, more coverage options. A lot of the carriers offer limits higher than the $250,000. Some of the carriers we work with go up to $1 million in dwelling coverage. Shorter waiting periods. You can often get coverage quoted and bound in effect the same day. And one of the biggest benefits could potentially the savings. We've seen for certain properties could be up to 40% cheaper than the National Flood Insurance Program. So like I said, up until 2019, the FEMA was the only option, and whatever that rate was, just based on the flood zone, that's what you paid. With the 2.0 changes, it's now become more targeted and assess individual property risk. So we've seen some rates improve, some have gone up as well. But now, as with the changes to allowing the private flood insurance, that there's more options essentially for your customers, borrowers, or even yourself. So when we have somebody that's potentially looking at a property in a flood zone, we're looking at all options. I think we have right now we have access to 3 private carriers plus the National Flood Insurance Program, and being able to obtain quotes from all the available carriers can give that customer more options. It's obviously buying a house. It's one of the biggest purchases somebody will make, and especially when you're trying to get through underwriting for a loan, every dollar counts. So having that ability to go for private has been a huge help. And as you can see, a lot of benefits potentially as well. So some Common questions. Can I shop my NFIP policy for a better rate? Comes up quite a bit. If you have the FEMA policy with NFIP and it's written incorrectly, you can't shop it for a better rate. It's going to be the same rate no matter what agency, insurance company, whether it's Allstate like us, a State Farm down the road, even a Geico if they're offering flood insurance through that program. It's all going to be the same rate. Only option is to potentially shop through a private flood insurance, and sometimes with the FEMA canceling and there's certain rules that may apply, but the only option is for a better rate would be to shop through private. Can I purchase flood insurance even if I'm not in a flood zone? So yes, and as you see in the earlier slides, it's becoming more and more of a concern that properties that we're not in high-risk flood zones are seeing more instances of flooding. So something that we really do recommend to all homeowners when somebody's buying a house and giving them that option that they can purchase flood insurance. And the good news is it tends to be significantly cheaper than somebody in a high-risk flood zone. Will depend from property to property as well as carrier, but sometimes a couple $100 can provide you pretty significant amount of coverage for flood insurance. Am I required to purchase flood insurance if my house is not in a flood zone, but a portion of my property is? So we talked about that a little bit, and the answer is yes. We've seen it, just a small little sliver of a backyard, that's right along the edge of a flood zone cutoff. And if that's part of the property, even if the house is not even touching, no other structures is even near it, but it's on the property, the bank will require you to purchase flood insurance for the entire property. So again, that's why we like to kind of look at all of our options and utilizing the actual flood maps to make sure that when the property is being looked at, if somebody's putting an offer in or moving forward, we know for sure whether or not they're going to be required to get that flood insurance. So some additional helpful links that we'll share for everybody, some available information with the risk 2.0 rating, the actual flood maps for review, and some information for lenders as yourself and real estate agents, lenders, or insurance as well. So it was a bunch there, but if anybody had any questions, I didn't pull up the chat yet. I can do that. You said you've seen 2.0 raise rates and lower them. Has it been more one way than the other? We're still kind of figuring that out. We have somebody that had a commercial property, and it was in a flood zone, mandatory flood zone, and the flood insurance for a commercial building about 10,000 square feet. The flood insurance was $9,000 in 2019. And then and they had actually got an elevation certificate because of the size of the property. I think they spent about $2,000 on the elevation certificate. It ended up doing nothing, would have made the rate more expensive. So it wasn't applied, but that's $2,000 lost. But then, believe it or not, we found out last year at the renewal with the 2.0 changes for that specific property, they deemed it a lower risk, and their flood insurance dropped from $9,000 to $3,000 for the year. So that was one of the biggest swings that we've seen. But what we're really seeing the difference is when the replacement cost, the value of the house, is higher. We're definitely seeing the premiums more, in line, increasing as the value of the homes go up. So that's something we've really noticed.
I think from a real estate perspective, what I gathered from all of this is that I know a lot of people tend to avoid homes that are in flood zones, and I get it, but sometimes if you look at the map and you see maybe it is just a corner of the property that wouldn't even affect the home is never flooded, it might be worth explaining that to a client where they plan on living in this house for a couple of this is like a forever home for them. Maybe going with a house with that in that setup is more beneficial. The one thing that I was confused with when I first started talking about houses with floods was the elevation certificate. I had agents who have been our agents for 20, 30 years say, oh, you do an elevation certificate and that'll get them out of their jam of a flood risk. And then it turns out it's not really true. It's just like Frank was saying, it can also not do anything, or it could even raise their rates. So I'm actually going to work with you guys. One of my clients' homes that I had them do an elevation certificate, and because they actually did elevate their house. So it's up there. The entire lot is up 2 feet because he just dumped like 30 tons of dirt 20 years ago, and he got put in a flood zone about 5 years ago. He didn't even know. That I'm trying to help him figure out a way to at least, like, is that possible to get him out of being designated a flood zone? Like, how hard is it to actually get out and remove yourself from that?
He wouldn't likely be able to for that property, but it's potential that he is so above the base flood elevation that his flood insurance is almost nothing. It's a pretty complex process for community or property to appeal the actual flood zone for themselves. I have never seen it or pursued it. I know there is a process for it. Also, too, over time, this is changing, and there are states in the country that don't participate at all in the National Flood Insurance Program. It's changing, obviously, as communities across the country as well that have not seen flood. Pretty sure New Jersey is 100% of all municipalities are part of the program. So that being said, you're hoping that they are constantly being evaluated, the maps, which they do, they change sometimes to the detriment of a homeowner. Like, we had the other office in Little Falls, and we had a lot of customers being victim of that. They just changed the flood maps in Little Falls. And if your house was in a flood zone, even if it wasn't before, you have that federal mortgage, you're now required to purchase flood insurance. So you'd hope that in specific areas they're doing their due diligence and reviewing the flood maps, because we have seen them change. It tends to be kind of a larger scale, like the community itself that would apply for those, but it's possible.
Yeah, and it's weird too. My clients in Bloomfield, they owned that house and they didn't even know their house was designated a flood zone. And I'm sure that's happening to I'm sure there's a lot of people right now, sellers, who have owned their home for a decade or so, never had a mortgage, and are now in a flood zone and really don't know. And it's kind of it's a little disappointing for me from a government perspective, and your own municipality. They should be informing at least their some kind of broad message letting everyone know, hey, you should check the FEMA map, it's free, just find out if you're in a flood zone, because you should be paying less property taxes if that's true. And like I said, that happened to that Bloomfield house. If those people stayed there for another 10 years, they would have been losing out on about $2,500 a year for a decade, paying property taxes they shouldn't have been paying, because FEMA now put them in a flood zone. So
you can make your own judgment. You have a property you're in a neighborhood, a block. I've seen it happen where they're the only house on a block that's outside the flood zone. Property's free and clear, not required, but you got the Passaic River down the street. You're the last house. Who's to say that doesn't change, in the next couple of years, and you don't get added to a
right.
To a
They start
zone.
creeping it along. There's a street like
Yeah.
I'm in Little Falls, so there's a street not far from me. About 3 houses in are all flood zones.
Yeah.
It's a dead end, and then all the houses after are not. And I'm sure it's just a matter of time before they start creeping that line out further. But does anybody else have any questions you want to chime in? Any situations you ran into with a client? Because we're all real estate agents here, so this class is really geared more for you all to really help your clients just be better equipped and be able to help them more. So jump right in if you like.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Leslie, go ahead.
Hi. Would we want to send this link to the map and have people check their own homes? Because what if somebody, I live right near a flood zone also. Would somebody, because what if they own their home and they don't even know? Like, how would somebody know if all of a sudden their home, the line changed and now they're in a flood zone?
Yeah, I mean, you would have to check. Honestly, for us, I mean, I can show you my phone is cut. I could scroll through realtor sending me just an address. What's this address? What's this address? What? And will you get us an address? We can tell you your flood situation, quote, and flood determination in minutes.
And
So
they're
honestly,
tough. They're tough to
sometimes
read.
just ask.
I mean,
Right, okay.
to
So
me,
it's
it's pretty-
really address by address. So for example, I could give in my next newsletter, I could give somebody's contact information and say, you know, just tell them your address just to double check and make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are maps that we can pull, but so the flood determination is almost always correct, but not always. And then there's the flood maps that we can also pull if it's like a potentially questionable area. But yeah, we can always get to the bottom of that for you.
The MLSs are pretty accurate as far as I know. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't trust Garden State or NJMLS. Garden State, I think, has a terrific hazard check for flood hazards. It'll show you exactly where the line is, and it'll say if you go into tax details on any property, you'll see SFHA, and if that says yes, the house is in a flood zone. If it says no, it's not. And if it's yes, you could just look at the line and zoom in on the actual lot. Like it'll show you the black outline, and it'll show you exactly where the cutout is. I mean, I'm sure, and all that data is from FEMA. So I don't
I
see.
usually go into Realist, into the flood maps to find out from the Realist is on NJ, and they have the flood maps. So as long as they're up to date, you can look up, you know.
Yeah.
And the only thing, they're some of the flood maps on the website, they're not always, and they are difficult to read. So we've had lenders come back with the ultimate determination based on the maps that they're using. And we've seen it happen where a lender's map potentially, where they're outdated or based on their decision, can still impose them to get the flood insurance. Rare, but we've seen it. So we just, like I said, I always like to.
So if the
double check.
lender doesn't know, then they're not going to require it based on their own maps, you're saying?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the lender going to go by ultimately? If they don't require it?
The flood maps that they use, we had a lender just not using updated maps for a property that was moved out of a flood zone. And it was the maps that they were using was not updated, and the property was still in a flood zone. So they were still required to purchase the flood insurance.
Okay.
Less common, but we've seen it happen.
So who ultimately checks on that? Because what if they already gave the loan, they didn't require flood insurance?
It's good. They wouldn't give the loan. They wouldn't.
Oh, underwriting would have found it out.
Yeah. So that we'll typically try to connect with the lender to find out what determination they have. You know, all the work that we do to prepare. You know, all of our resources ultimately it usually ends up being what is accurate and the zone and what's necessary. Very few, once or twice in my career that the lenders had a different map, outdated map that they were using, and some of the websites technology has been obviously improving, but it's a lot of data. Some of the websites not exactly the most user friendly, and the loading of the maps it is a little tricky to navigate. So we'll cover all our bases. We'll talk to everybody involved, look at every resource that we have to point them in the right direction.
All right. That would be pretty bad if you get to the point of underwriting and then you find out it's in a flood zone and then the whole deal
Yeah.
falls apart.
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
We see it.
So here's the house. If you want to see what I'm talking about, the house I had listed, they owned this house outright and never knew it was in a flood zone. And
Yeah.
it's actually funny. This map, if I don't know if you could see my mouse, but that corner, that top corner where the light blue is, that was the only corner that was in a flood zone. Now it looks like the map changed again. This is since 2020.
No, I don't think your screen is
I
sharing
can't see
right now.
anything.
Maybe
Oh, you
stop.
can't
I'll
see?
stop my share. Maybe.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe try stopping.
There you
There
go.
you go.
All right. Can you see mine now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is from the Garden State MLS. So
Oh,
if you come into just details, just like you would anywhere else, you
right.
can come right in and see property hazards and see how it says
Okay.
yes for SFHA. So this shows you the line. So this
Wow.
is Plainfield.
Wow.
And so when this happened in 2020, this sale, only this back corner of this property was cut. And now, oh wait, oops, sorry, wrong property. This one right here. So this neighbor, that neighbor, all these people got affected and they never were in a flood zone before. I actually knocked on all their doors and told them. I felt so
Yeah.
bad when I found out that these people were in a flood zone, and they grew the line further too. It was just this corner. Now it's under their deck. So,
Who is responsible to tell the homeowner when that happens, when they change the lines?
If they don't have a mortgage, if they own the house outright, and they don't follow any. If the community will typically release, I mean, in Little Falls, the community sent out letters to everybody in town. I believe FEMA as well. But if you don't have a mortgage or any interest in knowing, there's really no reason for you to be notified unless you have somebody knock on your door and tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the sad thing about it, right? So it's I think this is it's part of the reason why I thought this was a cool idea to share with at least my fellow realtors here to let people know that you don't know, you have no idea. You could be paying this. And the other thing, like I said, is they should be paying less taxes. So let's say it's true and they fight it and they can't win and whatever, that's it. FEMA said you're in a flood zone. Well, okay, Mr. Whatever municipality you're from, you need to lower my property taxes. And in those people's case, they were paying as if they weren't in a flood zone for all that time. And I don't even think they ended up getting a rebate back from it.
I was going to say, can they go back and get money back?
I'm sure
you could hire a lawyer and do it, but yeah, it's probably.
But it only changed. The sad part was it just changed about 5 months before we listed it. So
okay,
it was early 2020. I guess during the pandemic, government was busy and they're just like, oh, let's just redraw lines. And that's what happened while during the pandemic was happening. These lines were getting redrawn.
So something interesting by our office in Pequannock, we're right outside of Wayne. So Wayne and Pequannock, notoriously high risk neighborhoods in both towns. It was so bad in certain parts of Wayne, they rolled out a federal buyback program where they literally were just buying up blocks at market value of homes, knocking them down and putting trees, and no longer can be built on because of the claims, the excessive amount of claims that are being paid out repetitively on the same properties.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it cost the government less to literally knock the house down and plant trees than it did to keep paying out flood claims.
Yeah, there's parts of Wayne you can go down in residential areas. Well, you'll just see houses and you just see dead lots. You just see lots just out of nowhere. Like, where'd the house go? Oh, well, government knocked it down. They're not letting you build it back.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it can get really well. And look, and to Joe's point of what he showed you in the map and all of those things, that's all great. Honestly, though, we're here to tell you, utilize us, right? This is what we do all day long, right? So let us be the experts for you, right? You shoot me a tag, you'll all get all of our, our cell phone numbers, and literally just shoot us a text, right? I said I have one fret. It's just this address. Where is it? Address, flood zone. Is it a flood zone? Is it a flood zone? Then I get a little heart next to it when it's not. But it's all day long. He'll send them to you because he's an investor and a realtor, and he's got a decent sized group himself, and so just all day long they fire once. So before they list it, before they get involved in it, They run it by us. We're happy to be that for you. We want to do that and be a value to you guys to do that. So you don't have to worry about it. Don't become an expert in flood mapping. Call
Yeah,
us.
that's awesome.
We'll
I mean,
take care of it.
and that's like a general rule of thumb as a realtor, right? You don't want to pretend to be an expert in anything. You don't want to be a lawyer. You don't want to be an insurance agent. You don't want to be any of these things, but you want to know at least enough information to give your client some information. Don't tell them it is X or Y, but say, here's someone you should go and talk to really, break it down for you and unpack your issue and help you. So I think Joe and Frank are probably a really great option for that. They're local, and so definitely reach out to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're here. I take it seriously. We're here to educate and help first. I know the business follows. We're not going to be hounding any of you. We're not here to just mind business. I know, and you can get that sometimes, and it is frustrating. You use us. If it comes up that we can help your client, if it comes up we can help you, obviously we would love to work with you on your business. But first things first, let us teach you, educate you, help you. Get anything, call me on a Saturday, Sunday, I've done deals where I've conference called another carrier that I'm not associated with on a Sunday on vacation to help somebody who sends me a lot of business get a deal done, right? So you call us, we're here to help, and we really take that seriously.
Okay. Can all these things that are here, these links and stuff, is there any way to email them? I'm not good at copying.
Yeah, we can send out a summary. I think I'm not sure if we got 100% got the list of everybody's contact info, but if we can get that, we'll send out one after. And if you look in the chat, Chloe put out a Calendly invite. If you want to schedule just a little bit of time to talk with us, click through there, gets on our calendars, and we'll set aside some time to talk to all of you.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much. I have to jump off, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Very great meeting you.
Yeah,
Okay,
everybody that's in here, Joe, and I'll give everybody's contact info as long as you're okay with that, and they'll send you out something with some links and some notes. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed that video. I will be piecing together as time goes on, reaching out to other professionals in the industry to help keep real estate agents informed so they could keep their clients informed, and we can together do a better job for these home buyers, for these home sellers, for commercial properties, renters, you name it. I think it's something we should all collaborate to do and improve upon our knowledge, because real estate agents do need to know a lot of things, and we can't be an expert on all of them, and that's why there are professionals assigned to these tasks like lenders and attorneys and insurance brokers. So we just need to have the resources to inform our clients with some information that we could let them know kind of the gist of things and what to expect, and then say, here are some people I think you should speak to who could really help you delve into what you're looking at, what the situation is, what your options are, what your payment plan might be, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's the way to do it. I don't claim to be an expert on anything, and I certainly kind of gave up on asking other agents, no matter how many years experience they have, because a lot of the times they didn't really know what they were talking about. They were just handing me information that was handed to them from someone who also didn't know. So it's quite the industry, but hopefully together we could just figure it out and come together and teach each other and learn from each other, and most of all, help our clients make the right decisions and give them the best options too. So I hope that helps. Reach out anytime. I would be happy to talk to you about the matter about this video or any other topic real estate related. And until then, I hope you take care. Have a great day.